Hello everyone. So, we are going to start with the chapter friction. Now, what do you mean by friction? So, a frictional force arises when the two substances contact with each other. A friction is a force that resists the motion of objects or surfaces. Friction always works in the direction opposite from the direction the object is moving or trying to move. Like, for example, when we push a heavy box kept on floor, the force of friction occurs between the surface of floor and bottom of the box. And in the case of a ball rolling on the ground, friction occurs between the surface of ground and the surface of ball. In fact, friction acts on both the surfaces in contact with each other. So, friction is a force which occurs between the two objects, tend to slide over each other, and even when they are actually sliding, that is, moving over each other. It always slows a moving object down. Now, what will be the direction of force of friction? The force of friction acts in a direction opposite to the direction in which an object moves. Therefore, if the object is moving in a north direction, then the frictional force will be acting on the south direction. Now, students, do you know that there are actually three types of friction force? Static friction, sliding friction, and rolling friction. So we'll study all of them in detail. Now, what do you mean by static friction? You can see in this particular diagram, the three diagrams are given. So first is the static friction. Now, the static friction is a kind of starting friction because an object just tends to start moving. It does not actually move. So the object remains static, that is, it remains steady or stationary in this case. So static friction is the maximum frictional force present between any two objects when one object just tends to move or slip over the surface of the other. Then comes the sliding friction. So what do you mean by the sliding friction? Now, the frictional force present when one object moves slowly or slides over the surface of another object is known as sliding friction. So thus sliding friction comes into play when an object is sliding, that is, moving slowly but continuously over another object. Since the sliding friction is smaller than the static friction, it is easier to keep an object moving which is already in motion than to move the same object from rest. As we know that the static friction is more than the sliding friction. Why? Because it is easier to actually move an object which is already moving rather than making move the object which is stationary. See, like when an object has already started moving, that is sliding, the irregularities which are present on the surface do not get enough time to lock into the irregularities which are present on the surface of the other object completely. Since the interlocking of the two surfaces is less when an object has already started moving, therefore the sliding frictional is smaller than the static friction. And last but not the least is the rolling friction. So when an object rolls over the surface of another object, the resistance to its motion is known as rolling friction. So it is always easier to roll than to slide an object over another object. So rolling friction is much less than the sliding friction. Thus rolling reduces the friction. So there are certain things through which you can identify which type of frictional force is there. So friction is a force measured in newtons just like any other force. Static friction keeps an object at rest from moving. Sliding friction is a force that resists the motion of an object moving across a surface. And rolling friction is the friction exerted when an object rolls over a surface. Now I hope you understood. the three different types of frictional forces. Now students, till now we studied what do you mean by friction, what is actually frictional force, and the three different types of frictional force. Now we are going to study that what actually causes friction. So friction is caused due to the interlocking of irregularities between the two surfaces in contact. Let us read this statement. Let me explain you the statement thoroughly. Now, every object has a rough surface, though the surface may appear to be smooth to the naked eye. When we see through a microscope, it is found that the surfaces of all the objects have rough edges. Some of the particles on the surface of objects are in the form of tiny hills, while other forms grooves. The tiny hills and grooves on the surface of the object are called irregularities of surfaces. When we try to move one object over another object, the irregularities present on their surfaces gets entangled, that is locked, with one another. The interlocking of irregularities of the two surfaces opposes the motion of one object over the other and gives rise to force of friction. Thus, friction is caused by the interlocking of irregularities in the surfaces of the two objects which are in contact with each other. Now, surfaces are also of different types. So, in general, we can categorize them into two types, the smooth surfaces and the rough surfaces. So, the smooth surfaces have minute irregularities present between the two surfaces, whereas the rough surfaces have larger irregularities. So, the force of friction will be higher in which of these two surfaces? Yes, it will be higher in the rough surfaces. Now, supposedly, if I want to check whether what amount of force of friction is acting on an object, so how will I check? So, there is a spring balance. It is a device which is used for measuring force acting on an object. So, the spring balance contains a coiled spring which gets stretched when a force is applied to its free end. The extent by which the spring gets stretched is a measure of the force applied. Larger the stretching of spring, greater will be the magnitude of force applied. The stretching of spring or magnitude of force is indicated by a pointer attached to the spring which moves on a graduated scale. The reading on the scale of the spring balance gives us the magnitude of force. When the spring balance is held vertically, it is said that it is said to measure the weight of an object hung from its hook. And when a spring balance is held horizontally, it can be used to measure the force being applied to pull the object on an horizontal surface. So, whatever will be the force, okay, whatever will be the magnitude of force, it would be measured in newtons, and that particular magnitude is actually the magnitude of frictional force. So students, now that we have studied the cause of friction, now we are going to study how friction affects motion. So if you roll a ball along the floor or ground, it will slow down and stop even though no apparent force is being applied to it. So the ball slows down and stops because of frictional force. The friction slows down a moving object. Friction occurs when two objects rub against each other. A car that runs on a very rough road slows down due to friction. However, on a smooth road, it travels fast. A smooth surface has a very few bumps, sand hollows. There is less friction on a smooth surface. A running object can glide or move continuously with very little force.